It looked like somebody was bent over and had their head in the window of the deer blind. It either heard me or smelt me, and he pulled his head out of the tent and stood straight up, and that shocked me. They don't make people that big.
The way it moved, almost as if it was gliding across the beach. I've never seen anything move like that in my life. They were screaming at each other in gibberish. It sounded like a language, and they were chuntering away back and forwards, back and forwards, back and forwards. I know what a bear looks like, and there is no way on this planet that what I saw were bears.
What are you reporting?
Jesus Christ, you better... Sheriff, Zia!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh.
This is Cindy from Virginia, and you're listening to the one and only Sasquatch Chronicles.
Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. Got a great show planned for you tonight. We're going to be chatting with Ron. And Ron had an encounter on the Mogollon Rim there in Arizona. Most people are familiar with the Mogollon Monster. And Ron definitely ran into it that night. A very terrifying night. I'll let Ron describe the encounter. If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. And if you get a chance, check out sasquatchchronicles.com. You can become a member and get additional shows. Let's jump into it tonight. I want to welcome Ron to the show. Ron, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Wes.
Yeah, I really appreciate you being here, Ron. And I know your encounter took place on the Mogollon Rim there in Arizona. Several years ago, this happened to you. And I'm curious, prior to this encounter, what was your feeling regarding Bigfoot, Sasquatch, prior to your encounter?
Didn't believe in it. I thought it was, thought it was basically a hoax. I mean, I'd heard the stories of the Mogollon Monster ever since I was a kid growing up in Arizona. I didn't believe it at all. And because of that, I didn't know what was going on at the time it took place.
I gotcha. Well, if you would, to kind of walk us into your encounter. So it happened in Arizona. Kind of take us back to that moment. Tell us what you were doing and walk us into what happened.
Okay. Well, it happened. I left work on Saturday night about 10:30 and went and picked up a friend of mine. And my car was already loaded up, and went to his house and grabbed his stuff real quick. We probably made it up to the camp spot somewhere around 1:30, I think. I mean, I was really familiar with this area. So was Mark, who was with me, because I'd been up several times with him. And all my family members had been in the area and stuff like that with me on the weekends. And, going up there to get out of the heat and fish and camp and stuff. We got up there, and Mark picked out this spot that was really unusual. I mean, nobody camps there. I never camped there. We normally camped, probably 400 or 500 yards away from it, up into the forest. And he wanted to camp there for some reason. And, I went along with it, but, we were camping on a trail that led down into a canyon, and it was dirt and gravel. It wasn't grass or anything like that. It looked kind of uncomfortable. So we pulled our bags out because it was so late. We didn't unload the car or anything like that. We pulled our bags out and threw them down on the ground. And we had a flashlight and Mark's rifle with us. And, I saw Mark. He loaded the rifle. I'm not a gun person by any stretch of the imagination. I'm a fishing kind of guy. And he loaded the gun with the flashlight and took the safety off and said, okay, there's one in the chamber. It's ready to go. And he laid the gun above our heads. And there was a pile of rocks in between us, in between our sleeping bags. And then we settled down. And then a short time later, I could hear walking down in the canyon. I could hear the strides. I could hear it, the sand being, munched along the creek, so to speak. And I could tell it was, it was coming towards us. And then a short time after that, it crossed the creek and then came up the trail. And, when I heard somebody walking in the canyon, I thought it was somebody that I had met up there previously. And the guy had retired in Strawberry, Arizona. He'd actually gave me some fishing tips there. I'd run into him several times, really nice guy. And I thought, this has got to be him. But the footsteps, they sounded long. And this guy wasn't that tall. He's several inches shorter than me. And they sounded pretty heavy, which, I'm thinking, all right, somebody's coming up from fishing. And, I'd brought all my gear. It was in the car, but, I thought I'll get a fishing report from whoever this is. So I'm sitting there and I'm less than 100 feet from the trail. I mean, if it was 100 feet, we'd have been in the canyon. It'd have been out in the canyon or whatever, off the cliff, so to speak. And I used Google Map because I remember exactly where we were camped. And I used Google Map as to determine the length, how far away I was later. And so I'm sitting there and I can hear it walking up the trail. And I'm just, fixated on this person coming up because I want to find out, hey, what is the fishing like really? So I'm just fixated on the end of the top of the trail where it goes into the canyon. And then I see this black form stride up right in front of me. And there was moon. I don't remember how much moon exactly there was, but there was certainly enough that, I could see my car. And, it was within 100 feet from where it was parked along the road. But this black thing just strided right up to the top of the trail, and it turned, and it was directly in the moonlight at that point. And it turned right into me. I mean, like face to face. And we were probably, I guess 90 feet away or something like that. And as soon as it turned into me, I'm sitting up in my sleeping bag waiting to greet somebody. And it turned right into me, and then it was startled. I mean, I seen it was a solid black outline, but in the moonlight, I could tell that I could see I guess you'd call it an abdomen, a chest, and a face feature. And as soon as it seen me, it was startled, and it slid in the ground. I heard its feet slide in the gravel. I seen it shake. Like if you sneak up on somebody and scare them. This responded the same way, and it slid into the shadows because there was a tree at the top of the trail, and it slid part way into the shadows, and it just remains stiff as a board. It didn't move at all. And I was just staring at it for several minutes, and I didn't say anything to it. I didn't say, hey, how's the fishing or anything. I was just, this wasn't what I expected to come up the trail. I was expecting somebody carrying a fishing pole, a tackle box, and a flashlight. because it's just too dark to walk in the bottom of that canyon, or even to find that trail would be hard. I was just mesmerized by what I was looking at, but the fact that it wasn't moving, because I could see before it hit the top of the trail, I could see the other side of the canyon. I could see rocks on the other side. I could see trees on the other side. And this thing filled this, it just filled my, picture of vision there. And I could see this looked like a big black door, solid black door. That was probably about 8 foot at the shoulders. And it was probably about 4 feet wide. And it looked like it had a backpack on top of it, on top of the door. And I wasn't ready for it. This was the last thing I expected. And I just stared at it. And I could tell it was looking at me. It obviously seen me. And I just kept staring and staring. And then I'm like, am I really seeing this? Are my eyes playing tricks on me? And I don't know how many minutes I just sat there. And then I thought, maybe I'm not seeing this, and I was just wondering what happened. And, I after a few minutes, I laid back down in the sleeping bag, and I was just thinking like that was so strange. And I wasn't on the ground more than a few seconds. And then all of a sudden I heard the gravel moving again, and I heard it moving, and it sounded like it was moving, right at me and my friend. And then, at that point I realized, okay, I seen something, I heard something, something's going on here. And I sat back up real fast, and I'm just looking, panning the area. There's 3 pine trees right in front of me, and they're about right around, I want to say 30 feet away at the most, according to Google Maps. And it's dark underneath them, but behind them, it's behind the trees. There's a clearing there, and it's well lit. And I'm just looking, around in front of me, just panning back and forth to my left and right, and I didn't see anything. And then I looked directly in front of me at the tree closest to me, and that's where it went. It went up and was trying to hide behind the tree. And it was bigger than the tree. It was like it could not hide its whole body behind the tree. So I'm looking at it now, and now I'm kind of, I'm looking at a head that's sticking out at about, I guess, a normal person's level, right around 6 feet or something like that off the ground, and it's looking at me. And at that point, I kind of freaked. I told my friend, I said, get up. There's someone in the camp. And he didn't move. And then I got agitated, and I started, kind of like, when you talk to someone and you grit your teeth, like, get up.
Yeah.
And I was speaking rather loud, like, get up, like right now. And he didn't move. And so I started chewing on him, get up, and he didn't move. And then I was, like, this is not good. And then it stepped out from behind the tree, and then it stood fully upright at that point. And the level at what I was looking at was probably the level of, like, I'm 6 foot. And I think I was looking at about that level. And as it stepped away from the tree, I could see its entire outline. Like if you see somebody walking in front of a street light, not behind it, but in front of it, you can see the outline of that person, even though you can't tell who they are, so to speak. And I seen this black shadow step right out of the tree, but when it stepped out from behind the tree directly in front of me, it was covered with black hair. I mean, from head to toe, it was jet black, and it went all the way down. I mean, what I was looking at was probably below the shoulders, and there was hair sticking out the back of it, going all the way down. And yeah, that just fried my circuits at that point. I had no idea what to think at that point. It was like I just took a bus to Crazy Town and got off. I was just blown away. And I remember sitting there thinking, because my friend wasn't moving, I just thought, what's going on here, and who would believe this story? That something walked out of a canyon at 2:00 at night in the dark and was covered with hair on the Mogollon Rim. And as it walked, now I'm tracking it. I can see its whole outline, and it walked to the farthest tree to my left, or to its right, which was within like 45 feet. And then it turned and just looked at me and stood there in the dark. And I can see its whole outline. And it's just solid black. I remember it was blacker than any of the shadows. It was just black. And then it stood there looking at me, and then it walked back to the first tree again, and then stood there looking at me. And I think I was just lost. I was like, what is going on here? And then I grabbed the rifle, and it started walking back again to the other tree, and it just kept doing this, and it wasn't attacking. It didn't make anything other than the walking sounds. I couldn't hear it breathing, nothing, but it just kept walking back and forth in front of me like I was being stalked, or like we were being stalked. And I had the rifle, and I'm just watching it. And then, minutes later, I was starting to calm down enough to realize, all right, it's not going to attack me, or it doesn't appear to be. And I have this gun. What is going on? I mean, it walked out of the canyon. It's seen me. It doesn't have a flashlight. Exactly what's going on here. But I thought perhaps, maybe the gun is keeping it away or whatever. I mean, if a police officer or a game and fish, walked into your camp like that in the middle of the night and, and spoke to you or said something, I perhaps I would respond or whatever. But, you're supposed to have clothes on.
Yeah, this thing's just kind of storming around the camp the whole time that you're there then. I mean, it's not coming at you, but it's kind of observing you from a distance.
Right. It's just walking back and forth in front of me. And I started to, my senses started coming to me a little bit, and I remembered what happened to some friends of mine up on the Mogollon previously, and I knew them both really well. I'd been out camping with one of them since we were kids, and had camped with the other one as well. But they had got jumped in their camp when they were deer hunting, or they were elk hunting, one or the other. But they got beat up and had everything stolen from them. And all I could think of at the time was, the only reason for this person to do this is he's trying to draw my attention that there's got to be somebody, I'm sitting there holding a gun. There's somebody else has got to be involved. Nobody is this crazy. This just doesn't make sense. And I started thinking that there's somebody behind me, and they never caught the guys that did that to my friends. But all I could think of is I'm being flanked. There's got to be somebody else. Nobody else is this crazy to do this, to approach somebody like this that's holding a loaded, firearm. And I started looking back behind me into the forest, like, if is somebody approaching me from the rear. And I was below the road a little bit, probably 3 or 4 feet. So I sat up and I started, pointing the rifle back towards the forest, hoping somebody wasn't back there. And then I would look back at this guy and the, I guess you call him the stalker in front of me, and he's just walking back and forth. And I'm on my sleeping bag. I haven't got off the sleeping bag. At no time did I ever stand up. I just poked my head up and I was trying, if there was somebody in the forest behind me, I was trying to let him know I'm aware of you. And I have a rifle, but at the same time, because I was below the road, I didn't want to become a target either. So, I've never had any law enforcement training or any, never had the, never served in the military. So I'm sure they would have handled this, better than I did. But I just kept, going back and forth between watching the guy and then looking back in the forest. And then after a while, I thought or realized that this guy's not going to, the guy in front of me is not going to jump me. The threat is from the rear, because this makes no sense. Why this was taking place, why this walking back and forth. And, and it's gigantic and it's covered with hair, and it can walk around without flashlights. This just blew my mind. And so I started concentrating on what might be coming up from behind. And this went on, Wes, for over 2 hours. This walking back and forth and backing back and forth. It was, I guess I felt every emotion from anxiety to fear to anger. Because I didn't know how this was going to turn out. None of it made absolutely any sense whatsoever. And, about an hour before sunrise, it turned and, turned its back on me and walked down the trail and down the canyon. And I could hear its steps going down the trail, crossing the creek, and then I could hear it walking away, and then I couldn't hear it anymore. And, I felt relieved that it was leaving, that it left the camp. But at the same time, I thought, this is when we're about to be jumped. I was pretty nervous, but I just laid there looking, back towards the forest. I knew that this gun couldn't leave my hands. Even though I'm not a gun person, the gun never felt comfortable in my hands. I wanted my friend to wake up so I could give him the gun, is really what I wanted. Because I knew he could handle it much better than I could. And I just laid there, just staring behind me, as I was below the road, but I was just watching and listening for anything moving in the forest, and I didn't hear anything. And then right as the sun started to come up, right when it started to get light, I yelled at my friend. I said, "The sun's coming up." And then he sat up and he threw the sleeping bag off of him. And he said, "What was that?" And I was like, oh, you were awake? And he said, "Yeah, what was that?" And I said, "No, who was that?" And he said, "No, what was that?" And that was, for me, that was so odd, because he never seen it. I did. Everything about it told me that I was dealing with a human. The way it walked, the the fact that when it got to the top of the trail and it turned right into me, and it reacted human in as much as that it tried to hide. I mean, it concealed itself from me to a point that I thought perhaps my eyes were playing tricks on me, and laid back down. But everything told me this was a human. And that's why I thought it was so weird, is because I watched this. I'm the one who watched it, and he didn't. And I we had the flashlight there with us, and it was on the other side of Mark. I had to crawl over some rocks and then over top of Mark to grab the flashlight, because for a while there I wondered why I didn't grab the flashlight. But had I climbed over Mark, he'd have probably leaped up, grabbed the rifle, and shot everything in the forest, because I could tell he'd never slept at all. He was freaked. I just told him this trip is over, and we grabbed everything and jumped in the car, and we left. We went all the way back to Phoenix. I mean, this trip was done in less than 8 hours.
Yeah, it's a terrifying account, man, especially when you're not really sure what it's going to do or how it's going to react. Do you think the creature knew you were awake and you were watching it?
Oh, no, there's no doubt. No doubt. I'm sitting up there with a rifle in my hands. Now, I never pointed the rifle at it, but I made it obvious I have a rifle here in my hands, and it's just walking back and forth looking at me. I mean, if it could see me when it hit the top of the trail, it obviously seen me well enough that it was trying to hide from me. It was like, you're not supposed to be here. And it reacted in that way. So he could see me because, I didn't have any trees that were blocking me. I was in the moonlight, but there's no doubt he's seen me. Absolutely no doubt.
One of the other questions I want to ask you, you're basically describing a monster, really, 8 feet tall, your average description, and these things are huge. When people say 8 feet tall, I don't think it quite does it justice until you stand next to something that's 8 feet tall, hair covered, but then you also describe human. Now, you did a pretty good job articulating that, but I'm curious, are you talking human based on its reaction and how it was moving? I mean, it's on 2 legs, and did it kind of move around like what you would describe as a human? I'm kind of curious why you say human.
Yeah, because it walked on 2 legs like there was no way it was a bear. I'd have shot it if it was a bear. And I'm guessing the only reason I didn't shoot it was because I thought I was dealing with a human that it just defied explanation. I maybe somebody trained, somebody good with a firearm might have responded to it differently, but I thought, if I shoot this, I'm shooting a person.
Yeah,
and
I get what you mean. Yeah, I was just kind of curious, that of it coming up the trail and then kind of seeing you guys in that shock look. In my mind, as you were telling that portion, I was thinking of, like when someone's surprised, like if you're in a room or something and they kind of jump back for a second. Is that kind of its reaction when it first saw you?
That's exactly what happened. Meaning, somebody walks into some room and they don't want to be seen, and you're standing there right in the direct line of sight, and then they try to slide out of the way. And in this case, it slid back into, the part of the shadow underneath the tree. It had the presence of mind to do that. And I just couldn't figure out, why are you trying to hide from me? It blew my mind.
Yeah, and you hear a lot of times where they do seem to resemble humans or have human type reactions. I'm very curious on the behavior of it, kind of, stalking and hovering the campsite all night. What's your take on that? What's your feelings on why it did that?
Because we were between him and the other campers. The other campers were up the road. We passed them coming in a ways, and I could smell some lingering campfire smoke, and coming from the forest behind us. I'm only thinking that, it uses this trail and nobody, and Wes, I've been there, that spot, probably close to 50 times, and I never seen anybody camp there. And probably it responded like it had never seen anybody there either. And like nobody was supposed to be there. And, for a couple of years afterwards, when I'd go camping, I would wonder what was this person expecting or whatever. But, I figured stuff out. We could get to that a little bit later, but I just thought, in retrospect now, I think it was saying, I don't want to see you here tonight. And you're not supposed to be here. You're in the way. And I'll never sleep on a trail again in a forest in my life.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I don't blame you at all, man. One of the other questions I want to ask you, what was the conversation with Mark like? So you guys get in the car, you guys leave, you guys head back towards Phoenix. And what was that conversation like all the way back to Phoenix?
It was just mostly silence. At first it was pretty, it was pretty intense. Like, why didn't you help me? Why didn't you get up? And he just kept asking, what was that? And I told him it was a person. And the whole covered with hair, the whole size, anything. When I first seen the hair and, when it stepped out from behind the tree, I didn't think anybody would ever believe me if I told them exactly what I saw. And I never told anyone that story until I figured out what it was years later. And I basically kept it to myself, and Mark never told anybody about it. He never told his wife, nobody. But there was some other stuff that happened up there on the rim previously to this happening that I had no idea what it was, or what exactly caused my friend to act like that. But
what kind of other stuff? What are you talking about?
Well, a couple months before that, I was up with two other friends, and James and Mike. And Mike had never been camping before. This is like his first, maiden trip, maiden voyage into the forest, so to speak. But James I'd been out with before. And we were camped about 500 yards from this spot, directly due south into the forest from the canyon. And, we drove up there and set up camp in the afternoon, and we were there for a couple days. And I had a new car. It was kind of a smaller, compact, sporty kind of car. And James brought his vehicle, and it had an open bed, and we needed that, to haul all the camping gear up for three guys. I couldn't put all the camping gear in my car and put all three of us in it. So we took two cars, and we went up there, and we were about 500 yards away from this spot. So we were all set up for camp. And as it was starting to get dark, I asked James and Mike if they'd ever been snipe hunting. And that's kind of a joke that we do.
What's snipe hunting mean?
Well, snipe is a bird that doesn't exist in the forests of Arizona. But people that don't know any better, we tell them about it. And there's different ways of snipe hunting and stuff like that. But what you do, or what I had James do, I figured because this is Mike's first trip out, I'm not going to do this to him. But I had James, we walked a ways from the camp. We actually were probably about 200 or 300 yards from that spot where, that happened to me and my friend, where it walked out of the canyon. We walked a ways from the camp towards the canyon, but we were still in the forest. And I had James take his pillowcase and his flashlight and stand there in the forest and hold the flashlight, shine it down into the pillowcase. And I told him that me and Mike were going to chase going to go, a couple 100 yards away and chase these birds, these delicious tasting birds that don't exist. And we were going to chase them, and they would run into the pillowcase because they always run after the light. And as we're walking away from James, I'm telling, Mike this story. I'm letting him in on the joke. And so we get a couple 100 yards away from James. And the whole thing is we were going to circle back to the camp and just start dinner, and James was going to sit out there with the flashlight. And that's really the joke. And there's other variations of it that people do and stuff, but this was the more benign version. So we're standing there and we start to circle around back towards the camp. We're watching James. We can see the flashlight, and the pillowcase and everything. And we're kind of giggling about it. And then all of a sudden, James stood up and then turned to his right and shined the light behind him. And I didn't see what he shined the light at. But the next thing I know, he ran all the way across the forest back to the camp, jumped in his car, started the car up, and screeched and left. And me and Mike just thought, well, that's really weird. We were joking about, maybe he's going to go find a bathroom in some campground or something. This was really strange. And so we walked back to the campsite. James is gone, and he didn't come back. He drove all the way back to Phoenix and left us. And, we kept thinking, later that night, he's got to come back. He's got to, we got to haul all this stuff back, and he never came back. He left us there. So, me and Mike camped it out for the next couple days and then loaded everything up. And then I drove, dropped Mike off at his house and then went over to James's house to give him his camping stuff. But, I was kind of upset with him for doing that. And, I asked him, what's going on? And he said he didn't want to talk about it. And I thought maybe that he thought I offended him or something. And I apologized to him. I was like, man, that was a joke. I'm sorry. Didn't, and he said, no, that's not it. I could tell he was shook. He just, he was different. And he wouldn't tell me what happened. And before we had even gone up there for that trip, he was joking about the Mogi. And the Mogi is nickname for the Mogollon Monster. And, I just told him, that's a lot of hogwash. That, I heard those stories too. And no, I don't believe it. But he's seen something. He wouldn't tell me what it was. And, less than a year later, he moved to Texas. And I never seen him again. But that I thought that was odd when I figured this whole thing out. I mean, do you want me to tell you the story, how I figured out what happened?
Sure. Yeah.
Well, I was watching Netflix, and there was a show called Discovering Bigfoot. And this guy Todd Standing, I think, does it. And from what I understand, he's a controversial figure or whatever. I don't know a whole lot about him, but there was this show on Netflix, and I didn't believe in Bigfoot. I'd seen a couple episodes of Discovering Bigfoot, and I've seen Monster Quest, and of course they never find anything. And whenever they do, it's blurry. Bigfoot is obviously blurry. That's why there's no good pictures. And then at the start of the movie, I seen these, these clear photographs or clips of the of Todd Standing's Bigfoot. And I was remarking to my wife, look at the actors. The makeup has gotten so much better, over the years. It almost looks real. And then about the 9 to 10 minute mark of his documentary or whatever, it showed a picture of something trying to hide from him. I think this is between the 9 and 10 minute mark. It showed something big, about 9.5 feet tall, covered with hair, that was trying to hide from him behind this tree. And I just yelled, "What?" And my wife, it scared her. And I jumped up and I ran to the computer and typed in a web search, relating to this topic, relating to near where I was camped when this happened. And then it all just started. It all came back to me. Oh my goodness. And I thought, the Mogollon Monster. Wow, this makes sense. All these stories, these superstitions or whatever. It just all hit me like a flood. I know this thing still uses that trail because I've tracked sightings and stuff through various blogs and things throughout Arizona and the Mogollon Rim. And there was a sighting, I could have, where the guy was at, I could have hit him with a rock where it happened to me too. And fairly recent. So this thing uses this trail that I'm aware of, or it sounds like it uses the trail that's the only trail out of that canyon, unless it can climb up out of it in the dark, which I don't doubt. But
yeah, I love your encounter though. You go from skeptic to thinking it's nonsense to now you're face to face with this thing and it's stalking your camp. It's terrifying, man. Have you ever gone back to that area, or did you ever get a chance to talk to what's his name?
Yeah, I did. I called him right after I seen the documentary. I asked him. I said, "Do you remember our camping trip?" And he knew exactly. I didn't say which one because we'd been on several, and he told me, he named the spot. And I said, "Yeah, you remember that, huh?" And he goes, "Yeah." And I said, "What do you think that was?" And he knew what it was when he heard it walking in the bottom of the canyon. He was onto it. And as it turns out, he thought that, because I wasn't jumping around, I didn't stand up, I didn't move around or anything. I stayed on top of the bag. He thought that I was in the bag the whole time, to be fair to him. He was just hoping that it was going to walk by or go away. But he had to endure it too. He just didn't get to see it.
Yeah. Have you been back to that area?
No.
No.
Nope. No, I the one other time I went up on the Mogollon with Mark and 4 other friends of mine just for a day hike. And we hiked into a different canyon, and we got there in the afternoon, and we all got down to the bottom of the canyon, and we're in the creek and stuff. And everybody started going their own direction, and we ended up reassembling back at the bottom of the canyon, and it was too dark. It was now dangerous to try to climb out, and Mark, he ripped his shirt off and set it on fire and used it as a torch because he said, "We're not staying down here tonight." And that's actually how we got out of there. I've never spent another night on the Mogollon other than I did go up fishing one time, and I stayed in a motel in Payson, and then, drove to the fishing spots during the day and stayed indoors at night. But I never spent another night, never camped another night on the Mogollon in my life after that. My favorite spot in the world, and it was like it was taken away from me, so to speak.
Yeah, that it reminds me of what Teddy Roosevelt wrote about, the 2 miners that were out camping. Very similar encounter. This thing stalked their camp, and one of the guys took a shot and ended up with his head turned about 360 degrees, and, he ended up dead. It is fascinating. It's hard to say what I would do in that situation. I think for most listeners listening, it's hard to say what you would do. I think you did the right thing, though, not popping off a shot, just kind of standing your ground, because it eventually left, and they generally leave when the sun comes up, which makes no sense to me at all. But they do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the sun couldn't have come up, soon enough.
Yeah.
But, when I figured out what this stuff, what happened to me, I started telling people about it. People I worked with, I sat there and told my wife the whole story, right after I got off the computer, while the Discovering Bigfoot documentary was still going on, and I just had goosebumps up my arm, and I'm sitting there rattling off to my wife, telling her about this and stuff. And I've shared it with my friends, and they know me. They know I'm not going to make this stuff up, and I'm grateful for that. But I live up in Washington now. I'm not in Arizona anymore. But I had to go do an engineering project in Arizona a year ago, and a lot of the people that I was working with, I'd worked with many years ago, and a couple of them, were my roommates, and I told them about it, and one of them's real heavy into photography. He's got a lot of good equipment and stuff, and he said, let's all go back there. There was at least 3 of us that were planning on going back there, and I had to drive to Flagstaff and have my car worked on at a dealership. And, I was only 2.5 hours west, 2 hours maybe west of where it took place. And I thought, I can go over there and use my phone and, film, and show them exactly, I showed them on Google Earth where exactly it took place, and just show them, up close, and, walk down the canyon. And as I'm sitting at the auto dealership waiting for my car, I, thinking about all this, I started having an anxiety attack. And I thought, no, I'm not going back there even by myself during the daylight. It really bothered me. And I got back in the car and drove back to the town, in northern Arizona where I was staying. And I just thought, I'll go back with friends. I'm not going back by myself.
Yeah, I hear you. I want to ask you, there's a lot of weird things that happen to people throughout their lives. And it isn't until a lot of times people have a sighting to where they'll go, oh, that's what that was. And you had something very similar happen to you when you were fishing. Did that happen in Arizona? You were telling me about the screaming?
No. That happened up in Terrace, British Columbia. I was doing a fishing vacation up there with my wife and her parents, and it's about an 18-hour drive from where I live, and we drove up to Terrace. I wanted to fish. There's some famous rivers up there. With the kind of fishing that I do, I do a lot of salmon, steelhead fishing, stuff like that. But I wanted to fish the Babine, the Bulkley, the Skeena, and the Kispiox all on one trip. So me and my father-in-law, we were camped on an island in his fifth wheel in Terrace, and we left the campground, drove across the bridge to the south side of the river, and I had a topographical map of the area. And we ended out, I want to say 20 minutes west of Terrace towards Prince Rupert. We were on the south side of the river. I think, if I remember correctly, I believe it's called White Bottom Road. And we went all the way to the end of it. And it ends along the levee, and then it's bulldozed. So we drove as far along the levee as we could, and then right there at that mound of dirt, then it dumps out onto a big beach along the Skeena River. And so we parked right there and got out of the truck, and we had all our fishing gear, waders, and all that stuff. But as soon as we got out of the truck, we seen grizzly prints that came from out of the forest down onto the river, and down across the levee and down into the sand, and then along the river. And we thought, wow, that's pretty neat, but it's kind of scary too. But we went down there and we fished, and as soon as we got down to that spot on the Skeena, on that beach, then all of a sudden the trees in the forest, and we were probably, I want to say 50 yards, 75 yards, something like that from the forest on that road. I don't remember exactly. But there was forest behind on the other side of the truck. We were down on the river and the truck was up on the levee behind us. And then the forest was a ways back behind the truck. And all of a sudden, branches just started snapping. And then these wicked screams. And I mean, it sounded like two big creatures killing another big creature. There's definitely more than one of them. And, we both stopped fishing and just started looking, what's going on. And my father-in-law, he asked me, he said, what's being killed up there? And, I told him, well, those are bears killing, a moose or something. It was the only thing I could think of. And he said, Ron, those are not bears. And he's a hunter from Arizona. He's ex-military and stuff. I've never hunted with a rifle in my life. But I was like, no, those are bears. No, those are not bears. Those are not bears. And the screaming just kept going on. Well, I continued fishing, and I was catching fish, catching salmon, and I was just releasing them. I'm more of a catch and release guy. And he said, what are we going to do if they come down here? And I said, well, I can outrun you. And he goes,
I can outrun you.
Yeah, I told him I can outrun you. And he said, no, I'm serious. What are we going to do? And then I realized that he wasn't having fun. And I said, okay, let's, and I told him I'll just start keeping salmon. And so as I caught the salmon, I laid them out in a circle around us, in the event that whatever it was coming down there it would go through the salmon before it got to us. And these screams, Wes, they went on for 3 hours at least. And you could see full-size trees being shook. Now I've seen video of bears running up trees and seeing trees shake like that. But we couldn't see what was doing it because the truck was blocking our view, because it was parked on top of the levee, and the truck was directly between us and where these things were. But it just went on and went on and went on. And to the point that, when it finally stopped, because we didn't think we could leave the area. We didn't want to go towards it. We wanted to stay down there. And when it stopped, I took all the salmon and put them on 2 stringers, and I handed him one and I had one. And the whole idea was to, throw them, if we got charged or whatever, was to throw the salmon in front of us and give it up. And hopefully they'd rather eat that than us. And then we walked and got back in walked real fast and got back in the truck. And then he started, we had no business being out here, as we were driving away, real fast. I was concerned about the noises and stuff like that. The fishing was awesome, but he did not have a good time at all. He didn't catch one fish the whole time. And he's a good salmon fisherman.
Yeah, and did this happen prior to your encounter?
No, it happened afterwards.
Afterwards, I got you. Okay.
Yeah, I still didn't know what had happened on the Mogollon. And I never even told him about it until after, I never told my father-in-law about it until afterwards. And when I told him, what happened to me, and he was like, well, I don't know if I believe that. And I said, well, what do you think that was in BC? And he said, I don't know what it was, but it wasn't bears.
I hear you.
Yeah, he's not a believer in Bigfoot or anything, this type of activity, but he knows that something happened to me and Mark as well. There's something, what happened to him, he still can't explain. And there's nothing that screams like that, Wes. It was loud, and it was more than one, and it just kept going on, and it was, the
Did it sound
tree.
did it sound more human-like?
No. Oh, no. It was loud and just sounded blood curdling. Just like, get out of here. And, after I figured out, what that could have been up in Terrace, I wondered why the bulldozing stopped there, why it didn't go on, because it was like it stopped. We pulled right up to the pile of dirt at the end of the road there. It didn't go any further. You couldn't go further. You couldn't go around it. I wondered what that was, or why they stopped, at that point. And I tried to contact, there's a researcher up there, and I found out that he died in 2016, that he was located in the Terrace area. And I was going to tell him, exactly, here's exactly where it happened. And it happened in the month of August, the same month that I had my encounter in Arizona. Yeah, I've had that, that canyon in Arizona where that happened. I'd hiked up that canyon the year previous, and I went a ways up it, and then and I was by myself, and I just got this creeped out feeling, and I stopped, and I turned around and walked back. It was like I was having a wonderful time, and then all of a sudden I'm not. And this, this came, this sudden creeped out experience, or creeped out feeling. I don't know if I felt I was being watched. I just felt like I'm not feeling right. And it wasn't, I felt sick or anything like that. I just felt like really uncomfortable. And that happened up on the Mogollon as well, at Chevelon Lake. I drove up from Phoenix up there, and I had the whole lake to myself, and I wanted to go catch some brown trout. I got out of the car, walked down to the lake, and then just got creeped out and went back, got in the car, and went to another lake. I didn't see anything, didn't hear anything, just felt creeped out.
Let me ask you, Ron, I really appreciate you taking the time to share these encounters. And again, I was fascinated by the email you sent me. What's your take? What do you think that these things are? And there's no wrong answer, of course. I'm just curious on your personal opinion as far as what these things actually are.
Well, I honestly, I don't know. What I encountered was something that didn't look human, but acted very human. And when I say didn't look human, it didn't have no clothes on. It could walk in the dark without light, out in a canyon, and covered with hair, jet black, and gigantic. Way above. I think I told you in the email, I've seen Shaquille O'Neal up close. I mean, real close, like within 10 feet. And he's the biggest human I've ever seen. And he didn't have anything on that stalker that night in the canyon. But, some of the stuff that I hear people describe, with lights and orbs and stuff like that, that sounds like some of the stuff that me and some friends have dealt with in the occult. And I'm not an occult person, but I've dealt with, I've sat in on deliverances and stuff like that. and I'm familiar with that. And some of the things that people describe, come right out of dealing with the occult and talking with other friends that have dealt with it as well. But the other side of that, what I dealt with, other than looking at it, as apart from the size, everything about it said human.
Yeah, you have to let me know. I know you have plans on going back. I'd be real curious if anything else happens while you're up there.
Yeah, I have my two friends. They're both in northern Arizona that want to go with me, and they have some good camera equipment and stuff. But part of me is still a little bit apprehensive.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
Yeah, it's kind of. I was okay with hiking and fishing and everything by myself, because where I live in Washington, we have the sightings are within 10 miles of my house. So I don't get out and do the hiking, like I used to. It's kind of wrecked that, sort of. But, I'll go fishing here in town. I'll go down to the river and go salmon fishing or whatever, when they're running. But I don't go out in the Washington woods by myself. It's, nah.
Yeah, I can understand that. I can definitely understand that. I can't thank you enough for taking the time to come on and share what happened to you. Will you let me know if you go back and if anything happens?
Yeah, I'll let you know. And, thanks for, providing this outlet for people, because it, after what I experienced, and I ridiculed people, I really did, for believing in this stuff. But after I figured it out, I realized that a lot of these people have a real life monster movie that takes part in their life. And I can fully understand PTSD. So, prayers and blessings to all you wonderful people out there, and for being brave enough to share. Because I've been listening to your show for 2 years now, and what became a member a year ago. But thanks for doing this.
Yeah, thank you so much for the kind words, Ron. And thank you so much for taking the time to come on and talk about what happened to you. I really enjoyed talking with you.
All right. Well, thank you, sir, and have a great day.
You as well. And that's it for tonight, everyone. Remember, if you've had an encounter, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. If you get a chance, check out sasquatchchronicles.com. You can become a member and get additional shows. Until next time, everyone.